Well, we're a bunch of friends who've been working together online as a poetry group for 4 or 5 years now. And we decided some time ago it would be really nice to have an anthology of some sort. And so this is what we've done, which is called Flight Patterns. We've called ourselves the Wild Birds. We've called ourselves the Wild Birds Collective. And this is a bit of an experiment for us, really. We've put together a small book, which is a series of poems that we've between us written over the years, which are themed around love and loss and remembrance, the things that matter to us. I think one of the most important things I've found about working with my lovely friends here is that poetry brings us together. It enables us to celebrate the lives we've had. It enables us to think about the deep themes of life and death, and about what it is to be human. And what you'll see from the discussion I hope that we have tonight, that our poetry practice has developed over time. We're really interested in each other's work. We've got a really good, strong shared heritage. Some of our colleagues from New Zealand who are in New Zealand, their ancestors were Scots or Irish. And for those of us over here up here in the Northern Hemisphere, we've got friends and colleagues who are in the Southern Hemisphere as well. So there's lots of connections there. The anthology has been put together this year in response to some questions I was dealing with as well, which were for academic purposes. But I'm glad we've done it. I would like to, now I hope we've successfully had this project together, is maybe go for another anthology in the future, something that's perhaps even a bit bigger than this one. But I think we're all pleased with how this went. We do have some slides here which are to show you some of the illustrations that have been done, which we'll show you later. But we're going to first of all start with one of the wild birds who is based in New Zealand, and that's Marjorie Woodfield. Marjorie, if you'd like to say hello to everyone, you can put your mic on now. This is okay to be heard. Okay, so Marjorie, I know you can speak now. Before we actually hear one of your poems, it's from the anthology. I'd really like to just get us into the meat of talking about why we love poetry and what we do with our poetry practice. I'd like to ask you, you've been writing poetry for a long time. When you are writing poetry, how do you recognize when a poem arrives, if you like? Is it an image that you conjure in your mind? Is it a phrase? Is it an artwork? What happens for you when you create a poem?
Right. Well, Caroline, that's not an easy question. There's no easy answer, but the word that came into my mind when I thought about it was the word serendipity.
Yeah.
And I want to explain what this looks like by referring to the poem I'm going to read, which is called I Know the Constellations. Several years ago, I went to a movie, and it was called No Ordinary Sheila. It documented the life of a New Zealand writer and natural history illustrator, and her name was Sheila Natouche. I remember too that we just at that point in time returned to New Zealand to settle, having lived in the Middle East for quite a long time. Sheila Natouche was born on Stewart Island, which is a little island, very remote, very rugged, at the southernmost tip of New Zealand. And her father taught her to inhabit the natural world, the land, the sea, and the sky. Her mother taught her to draw and write. And I remember the movie. I remember the panoramic vistas of New Zealand landscape, the startling mountain peaks, the lush green forest, and the wild ocean. And I remember thinking, I've forgotten all this, how beautiful my country is. So I was absolutely mesmerized by it. And then there was a point in the movie where there was a seminal comment. She said, I know the constellations. My father taught me their names. And I thought, those words, that's a poem. And so at home later, I took those words, they became the title and the first line of a poem which melded together my experiences with a father who also loved the night sky. And then moving forward in time to a visit into the Saudi Arabian desert where we pitched tents and slept under the night sky. So that's serendipity.
Well, that's a marvelous example of that, how you're triggered into the process and the impulse to create poetry from a moment that's
Yes.
you cannot plan it. You cannot plan it.
No, no,
Yeah.
no.
How do you know then when you've written a poem, Marjorie? How do you know when you've finished it? Because it's very easy to write, revise, and revise and revise and revise. But how do you know when you've actually completed it?
Oh, that's another really difficult question. Um, Sometimes a poem, like I know the constellations, just arrives. It just grows on the paper, and that's a gift. And it doesn't happen very often. Mostly, to be honest, Caroline, it's hard slog. It's writing and rewriting. It's paring down. It's redefining what you're trying to do. It's putting it aside for weeks, months, sometimes a couple of years, coming back to it, and then at some point of time, thinking it's done, putting your pen down and moving on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've heard other poets talk about this and the endless revisions that you can do over years and years and years, but then there's the moment when it's it can't go any further. That's it. Well, you talked about I know the constellations just now, so let's hear it from you, Marjorie. Could you read us? So this is one of the poems. It's in our small anthology called Flight Patterns, and it's Marjorie's wonderful I Know the Constellations. Marjorie.
Thank you. I know the constellations. My father taught me their names. Orion, the hunter, his jeweled belt, three bright stars close together, the easiest to find, he said. Behind Orion, Sirius, the twins, Castor and Pollux. He bent down, told me stories. We take the narrow road through the desert, turn towards Elephant Rock, watch colours fade from gold, pass around small crescent biscuits. Tonight there is no moon, the desert quiet, each breath a whisper. Brightness of planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, Milky Way, Orion, Cassiopeia, falling stars so close I could cut one in my hand, run to my father with unfurling fingers, crying, see what I have brought you.
Delightful, absolutely delightful, and it feels very tender. We call this poems about love, loss, and remembrance, and so on, and it feels like you're really remembering your own father with that poem.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marjorie. So
Pleasure.
Marjorie's on the other side of the planet to me, but Jeannie's a lot closer. So Jeannie is up in Scotland, and I feel very close to Jeannie for all sorts of reasons, not least because we studied an MLit at the University of Glasgow together. Jeannie's going to read in a moment. Well, in fact, I think we're going to ask you to read first, Jeannie. So if you wouldn't mind reading, Jeannie, I'm going to get a slide up for you. There's Jeannie. Jeannie, you're going to read us, I think. You introduce your own poem because it is rather marvellous.
Yeah, this poem is No One Told the Damselflies. No one told the shimmering dance of damselflies. Summer is almost gone. No one told the honeysuckle drunken bumblebees. Winter is coming. No one told the last late clutch of hungry sparrow chicks. The frost is almost here. No one needs to tell us this may be our last full summer. Your body, strong and steady as the birch tree, while your mind drops memories like falling leaves, and coming winter storms will one day strip you bare. Still, we sit outdoors, late in life, in late September, clinging a moment longer under the first soft-lit evening star. Meanwhile, the passing day lives on elsewhere, while rooks are peaceful, treetop bound, and crows settle down on the steeple.
That's a very fine poem, and it was, I think, published in Dementia Together, wasn't it? The magazine for Alzheimer's UK.
Mhm.
It's got such wonderful imagery in it, Jeannie. One of the reasons we all of us decided to make this short video is really because we've got family and friends as well who are interested in what we do. And there's a lot of the poetry that's here, which is about family and friends. And this is very much one of those poems. Jeannie, when you write prose, but you've also come to write poetry as well, more recently, perhaps. When you write poetry, is it something which is incredibly private for you? Or are you writing because you have a reader in mind and you want it to be published, to be out there? How does that work for you?
I think it very much starts as something just for me. Um, I'm a very recent poet, and I'm the newest member of the Wild Birds Collective. And yes, as you said, I normally write prose, but occasionally it's almost like something spills out and escapes. And that's about writing for myself, about having some experience, emotion, having a concept that means a lot to me, and I just want to get it down in some way in paper. And work it out. Sometimes it's about working out what that emotion's about and working what that feeling is and working out how to cope with something. So in a great sense, it is just for me. But I don't think it's private either. I'm always astonished that somebody else wants to read my poems. I don't have any great expectations that anyone will, so it always surprises and delights me if somebody else is interested. But yeah, there's something very special when you've gone very deeply into an emotion or an experience that you've had, and you share that in some limited way on a piece of paper or in a book, as we have here. There's something really special when that connects with others, and others read it and feel something of the same emotion or understand the experience. That's really special. So I would never want to keep them totally private. Although there's a lot that's sitting on my computer that may never ever see the light of day.
I would imagine probably the rest of us will probably say the same kind of thing, Jeannie. But I'm really not astonished about people wanting to read what you've written, because it's really profoundly moving, in my view, some of your poetry. And you know, if anyone who's watching this video after today, um, you know, if you can read or hear something in that poem that each of us is reading, which is touching for you, it's a really profound moment, I think, of sharing that a poet can do, is to create that moment of something which is a life moment, really. Um, you're a busy woman as well, because you have lots of things that you have to do in your daily life. Plenty of things that you've got to do which are quite routine, but also probably quite a lot of disruption, visitors and so on. How do you manage to write during your life, during your daily kind of chores in your schedule? How do you manage it, Jeannie?
I think partly I have to, and that would, apply to all my writing, not just to poetry writing, because if I wasn't writing, I would feel very limited in my life. I'm older. I care for my husband who has dementia. I also care for a son who has a severe mental illness, and for two grandchildren on and off part-time. So there's a lot of caring, a lot of giving out. And if there wasn't writing, I'm not sure how I would survive all of that. So it is really something that's very important to me. But I'm interested in the fact that sometimes restriction is actually quite a good thing when you're writing. You can't have a novel with 30 characters in it. It just gets so confusing. So you have to cut down the number of characters. You enter a competition, for a short story that's 1,200 words or whatever. And in the same way with poetry, there are limits, and those limits can actually, those restrictions can, just as in life, they can create something unexpected. Sometimes the restrictions in poetry can do that as well. We did a little in the group of writing to particular forms, which I'd never done before, poetic forms. And frustrating as that can be, I think sometimes the restrictions really bring out something that maybe wouldn't have been there before.
Yeah. I so agree with you on that. I like a brief. I like to know, I've got to write a sonnet, or I've got to write, something, an ode, or I like that constraint, and it forces me to produce in many ways. Otherwise, I get distracted by gardening or some other such thing. Marvelous, Jeannie. Thank you so much for that. As I mentioned earlier on, we've got some illustrations in the book which have been done by Roger Seeley. I must declare an interest. Roger is my husband, but the picture he did for Jeannie's part of the book is the damselflies, which is lovely. Thank you, Jeannie. We're going to hear now from Lindsay. Lindsay, too, is in the Southern Hemisphere, down under. And I think, first of all, Lindsay, what we're going to do is we'll ask you a couple of questions. I've got a technical question here, which I'm going to leave till second. I'm going to ask you the first one, though, which came to my mind when I was thinking about our discussion, is I always see, we have our cameras on and we see bookshelves and we see sometimes a backdrop which is outside occasionally if people are working on their phones. But Lindsay, your home is always so colourful with tapestries, and it looks like there's a lot of musical instruments around and there's books and so on. If you were to create an ideal writing atmosphere or an environment, have you got it? Or if you haven't got it, what would it look like? And we're going to need to hear your lovely voice, Lindsay. So you're going to unmute for us.
Yeah.
There you
are. A favourite environment, I had it once, and it was a rooftop. But not these days. Usually I write sitting up in bed with a cup of tea or coffee in the early morning or the late evening, I find is best. But the rooftop came from a time as a teenager, an effort to get away from family chores and noisy brothers. And I'd climb onto the little low fence and then onto the woodshed. And from the woodshed, if I could really hold myself up, I could get onto the roof. And I would go up there with a towel and a notebook and my pen and stretch out on the warm tiles. And from up there, I could see right across to the Port Hills and down to the Heathcote River, which was just across from our house. So it was the exhilaration of finding this own secret little place. And I fancied nobody knew I was up there. But in actual fact, my mother knew very well. So I overheard her tell my aunt.
Oh, so rooftop. You don't write on the rooftop now, though.
I don't write on the rooftop now, but I always remember it fondly. I think that your eyes can stretch out and your mind can stretch out when you're up high and there are birds flying over and noises just vaguely drifting up, from around other roads and yards and gardens. And I sort of, I think I got into the habit then, being isolated up there, of slipping into my own sort of magic realism. And I still use that today. I don't write. I write mostly how I feel an experience was rather than the actual facts of how it was, I think. But from my cozy bed, usually.
Yes, it's interesting. A room of one's own, or a rooftop of one's own, or wherever we choose to write, we create the space that we can. Yeah. Marvelous. It's interesting as well. I think those of us wild birds who are in New Zealand, I don't know if it's true for those of us who are in Ireland and Scotland as well, but you write a lot of the symbolism in your poetry is coming from that wonderful natural world. It comes up a lot in your poetry. I'm a very urban London girl, despite having a father who was a Scot, but I've very much noticed the difference in kind of preoccupations, I guess, that come up, maybe because of our background being urban or less so. Lindsay, another question I was going to ask you today is your relationship with form. Do you like form? Do you like structure, or do you like to push against it? And if there's a structure or a form that you really like, is there one that you kind of fall back on or go to?
Yeah, I do write in closed or fixed form, especially haiku. I write a lot of haiku, sometimes haibun, and I find the challenge of writing in a particular form is very good. I think I resisted at first, but then if I think, no, it has to be a sonnet, do it, I'm sometimes surprised with the result. I'm happy with it. But mostly I enjoy just experimenting with form. When I first sit down, I usually just write in prose, just write quickly in a stream. And then later there's that delicious fun of ordering it into the length of lines and, where the line breaks will be, and the stanza arrangement. I suppose I mostly do write in short lines and free verse, though. Yeah. And when it comes to determining line breaks, I try to use natural speech rhythm, say the word out loud and feel where the break should be. And sometimes use white space to indicate pace or tone or emphasis. Yeah.
I think that's really interesting because, we came together with the help of Lynn Davidson, who's acted as a bit of a mentor or coach or guide for us all, I think. And there's been times when Lynn has set us exercises that have kind of forced us into those kind of practices, which always, I think it's enormous. It's like doing, it's like having a workout when you have these kind of things to work to and with. I think those kind of structures are useful for poets, for flexing and understanding how the rhythms and pacing works in a poem. You're going to read us one of your poems, Lindsay. You're going to read us Blood Orange. Again, this is what you included in the anthology. So can we hear Blood Orange? Is there anything you want to say about it before you read it?
Not really. It's just a little passionate piece.
Let's have it.
A piece of passion. Okay. Blood Orange. I could fit like a round fruit in the palm of your hand, fall into segments like a peeled orange, fully ripe and drizzling between your fingers. For just this moment, I am all there is. And of course, on the other hand, I am nothing at all.
It's a beautiful, neat little poem. I just love it. To me, it's so full of passion as well. I really admire it. So few words, saying so much. That's brilliant, Lindsay. Thank you so much for that. So yeah, so we're doing this video really so that we can share some of this with family and friends, and anyone else who's interested in a bunch of people getting together, setting up a poetry group and loving each other's company and benefiting from hearing each other's work and working with each other. We're going to move to Emily, I think. Now, Emily is based in Ireland. Before we do, click onto my slides. So we've got a slide there. Another one of those illustrations. If you want to know what that illustration is all about, that my husband did for Lindsay, you'll have to read the book. But Emily's going to join us now. So Emily's in. I think you're in, aren't you, Emily?
I am indeed.
That's
Hi,
great.
Hi, Carolyn.
Hi there. I think we're going to hear your poem first, and then we'll talk a couple of questions about your poetry practice. So, Emily, tell us about Plankstar.
Okay, I'm going to read Plankstar, and there's an epigraph. This poem was written to mark the unveiling of the supermassive black hole at the center of the Milky Way in May 2022. Plankstar. When the gravitational waves that bounce between us cease, let us not lament our collapsed star, but accept the pause and wait. Love, Let's trust that each black hole we make is not so much an ending or something stellar burning out, but that we will expand again. And it might take a quantum leap to see through clouds of nebulae, to keep faith with untraceable quarks of our space. And when silence lapses and we speak in whole sentences again, let us embrace our nascent state, the immutability of matter we once thought at stake.
Wow, big ideas there. Wonderfully big ideas. I mean, Emily, you're a teacher of creative writing as well at Limerick. So reading other people's material, helping other people develop material, and so on. It's your life has been in writing for a long time. Do you think that because you've been a tutor in creative writing, because you've written so much poetry, do you think, can you note that whether your themes that obsess you or that occupy your mind most of the time, have they changed over time, those themes for poetry, and what do you think's made you change, if that's true?
That is such an interesting question, Caroline. I suppose I'd like to think that my mind is wide open and that I stay curious about everything and anything. And have my themes changed? I suppose I'm working on my fourth collection now, and I have three collections published to date. The first collection was a young collection. It was full of exuberance in language and in my youth and in my life and relationships and really the everyday world around me. And I think that hasn't changed really because I'm very concerned with the immediate. There's a lovely quote by Charles Simic, who's writing about William Carlos Williams, and he says, "It is the ordinary, the overlooked, the quotidian, the supposedly familiar and commonplace that is the place of the miraculous, the numinous." And I suppose what he's saying there is that William Carlos Williams could write about, a very ordinary thing like the red wheelbarrow, but he paid attention. He brought his attentiveness to it. And I think that's a common aspect of my poetry, really, is that I like to focus on the immediate around me, the ordinary, the everyday, and work through it and bring some attentiveness to it. So poetry has always been a way for me to try and understand and make sense of what's going on around me, what's going on in my life. And then in the sense of like in the realm of ideas, I'm very interested in developments in science and all of those kind of things as well. Hence the poem about the Planck star. Um, so in terms of continuity or continuous thread maybe in my work, it would have to be the interconnectedness of us all, as human beings with the world around us, with history, with the cosmos. And in fact, the four poems that I've contributed to Flight Patterns are a good representation, I think, of the kind of themes that I work with and that I'm interested in. For example, there's a poem called Harmonia, and it's about the sound of my harp strings when I coughed, and I hadn't played the harp in a long time. It was neglected, gathering dust in the corner of the sitting room. And when I coughed and heard the strings vibrate, I thought about Pythagoras and about how it was Pythagoras who measured the vibration of music and the length of the strings. And it kind of spawned a whole lot of thinking about things and about the idea of harmonia. The ancient Greeks sought harmony and how I was seeking domestic harmony and trying to help my son with some special educational needs to grasp maths. And we were trying to tackle equations and algebra and everything. So it was that kind of full circle. And I think those themes haven't really changed. I'm really interested in nature and science and astronomy and all of these things. I'm no expert at all. I'm no expert at all. But as Mary Oliver put it beautifully, the world offers itself to your imagination, in that poem, The Wild Geese. And I think that's so yeah, a big span of interests, I would say.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. That links a bit to what Marjorie was saying about also about serendipity, about just seeing as something and it triggers something else, blank, a new link. So there are links one
Absolutely.
trigger
And
will send
Lindsay
you.
Blood Orange, the previous poem,
Yeah,
when she said, I'm everything and nothing at the same time, like that's the kind of polarity that Simic is talking about with Williams, to see the polarity in the everyday, to see those tensions. And you expressed that beautifully in your poem, Lindsay, there as well on the Blood Orange. I am all there is, and of course, on the other hand, I am nothing at all. So
yeah,
that kind of, yeah, paying attention to
yeah,
the quotidian and just, yeah.
yeah. It kind of leads me on. You talking about the heart and the harmonia and so on. The place of sound when we are poets, inevitably, it is a spoken medium. So that's where its roots have come from. So sound, whether it's rhythm or rhyme, a cadence, the way that voice works with it. How much does that matter to you in the work that you do? Do you think now in more than it did, or
It always, it's a perennial passion of mine. I suppose as you know, I'm a musician as well.
Mhm.
And sometimes I think the poetry is kind of music, is trap music trying to escape. And I do think poetry is first and foremost an oral form. And it is, we do want it to give us pleasure. In his the redress of poetry, Seamus Heaney talked about the fact that he was talking about should poetry be political, and he said poetry cannot ever afford to lose its delight in itself as a process of love language, and
Mm.
and for the ear. And there's a lovely quote from Carol Ann Duffy who says poetry is the music of being human. And I love that phrase, I suppose, not least because it embodies that sense of, that it's about sound. It's about, yeah. And certainly in terms of my own process, you know, as other poets were saying earlier, I will hear a cadence first, or I'll hear something that sounds appealing,
Mm.
whether it's a rhythmic phrase that comes into mind, or whether it's vowel music of a line that has lots of assonance in it. I'm a divil for the assonance, I have to say, and the consonants. And then maybe something that's anapestic, did-a-dum, 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 and it has that appealing rhythm. And so I often have to kind of temper that with a little bit of, you know, yeah, I can't afford to let my poem run away with the music, and that's something that I have to keep in check myself,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
because I get very seduced by the music and the rhythm,
yeah,
and I have to sometimes bring it back to, what's actually at the root of this poem, what's the dialectic, what am I seeking to understand better. So yeah, but definitely the music comes first as opposed to an image. It's usually something musical or sound.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Fascinating. I went to see Kay Tempest just recently,
Oh,
uh,
fabulous.
and it was really amazing. He's been a they, he's been a she, he's now a he, and Kay was marvelous, absolutely marvelous, and read part from the novel that he's just written. First, I think, second novel, first novel. Anyway, there was a section, and I thought that he was going to read from the book, but in fact, because he had his history as that of being a rap artist,
Yeah, yeah.
and he'd memorized a section of the book, and he rapped it, and the rhythm of it, the rhythm of the reading of it was
Yeah.
unbelievably
Mesmeric. I think
marvelous.
mesmeric.
Oh, compelling and marvelous. So, and all of that stuff about how does the rhythm work, the rhymes and the rhythms and the speed with which the delivery was done, absolutely marvelous. So yeah, sound is massively important. Poetry, where's it from?
I agree.
Yeah. Thank you, Emily.
Thanks, Caroline.
Emily's couple of poems in there. There's an illustration from one of the poems, which is about a long case clock, which is marvelous. Siobhan, thank you, Emily. Siobhan, I think we're going to give you a question first, are we, Siobhan? And then
That'd be lovely.
Yeah, okay, let's talk
Yep.
questions, Siobhan. It's just so marvelous that you're part of this group, and your wonderful daughter was a part of this group too, and we'll read one of her poems in a moment. But the poetry that you write, as when you're a psychotherapist, you've got an enormous practice there. Do you see the poems that you write, are they rooted in your life, in autobiography, or is it about invention and imagination?
Well, Cara, I think this is an incredible question. And my sort of first answer is, how could they not be rooted in autobiography?
Mm.
But having said that, I think poems come from so many places. And I found that particularly when I'm traveling, something will arise, and it's kind of harking back to what you said, Marjorie, like the serendipity of something just coming to mind, and then how to shape that, of course, is often much more problematic. So I kind of think that it's wonderful sitting listening to this conversation today. It's so rich, and as it unfolded, I thought, well, what more can I say, really? Because you're all saying it all so articulately. But I think that there's something about the unique way that each poet sees the world that is embedded in the words that you put on the paper. What else would I want to say? Yeah, because I'm a psychoanalyst, I'm very interested in the unconscious. It's been my bread and butter for many years, and I do think that the germ of a poem arises from the unconscious. There's something very mysterious about it. The germ of best poems. When I feel most satisfied with what I've written, I think, my God, where did that come from? It wasn't a conscious decision at all.
Yeah, I think I saw some heads nodding in agreement with you on that one. And I think that's really true, that there's something buried deep in us sometimes that comes to the top. And it is that wonderful thing of the human mind. Do you ever get writer's block? Do you ever get a moment when you think, I can't do it?
Do I ever get writer's block?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How do you deal with it? I mean, how do you get over your hump if you can't write a word? Is there
I
something
think
you do?
the word that comes to mind first, Caro, is I suffer. So
yeah.
But having said that, there are two things that I'm thinking about. I mean, you mentioned Lynn, who's been a wonderful mentor for us. And I think I've learned a huge amount by having to put my mind to the exercises that she sets us. So, having to write a poem or having to come up with some words, because Lynn has said, work around this, and she's wonderfully flexible, of course, so she doesn't, I don't feel boxed in by it, but I feel challenged by it in a good way.
Yeah.
So it makes me go places I would never go otherwise. For example, write a sonnet or write a pantoum, First of all, I have to figure out what that means, and then see if I can find some words that will, I'll be able to present to the group.
Yeah.
So it's humbling, and it's also inspiring.
Yeah.
And the other thing I was thinking about in relation to that question is Owen Marshall, who's one of our taonga here in New Zealand. He's a very revered writer of short stories. And I did a course at university with him some years ago, and he said to me, you just have to write. Every day you have to sit down with a blank piece of paper and make some words. And it doesn't matter if they're rubbish or if they're not. I have to confess, hand on heart, I don't do that as much as I'd like to. But I think he's talking about the discipline. And to me, the two things go together. There's the inspiration, there's whatever that is, the poet's muse that comes unbidden. And then there's the discipline, working it over. So that's kind of my small contribution to writer's block.
Yeah. But it's interesting when you mentioned Lynn and exercises and writing to a brief. It's what Jeannie was talking about, in a sense, is if you're given something, you've got to produce it. And I suppose there is something about making ourselves do it. I have a little box of pictures, and if I get stuck, I just pull a picture out from that and use that as some kind of way of stimulating me to produce. So I think maybe we've all got little hints, tricks that we use. And if it's a high key or a high bun, that Lindsay uses. You know, it's using different forms to get ourselves over the block, which I think is really helpful. You're going to read from the book. You're going to read Winter Equinox, aren't you, Siobhan?
Yeah, I'm going to read Winter Equinox because here in the South Island of New Zealand, it's bitterly cold and we've just passed the equinox. And I guess this is an example of a poem that just came to me when I was walking. I live right on the edge of the sea, and there's a foreshore track, and I was just walking along the track. And I did want to acknowledge Roger and his beautiful illustrations that he did for us, and your work as well, Caro, because I think it's an exquisite little book, and that's down to you and Roger.
Well,
So,
we're quite a team, us two. You know, as those of you who have been married, whether your partner's still with you or not. However state your partner's in, you know, if you're one is incredibly lucky if you have a partnership that works. But he's not a bad drawer, is he? He's not a bad drawer.
He's beautiful what he's done, really beautiful.
Anyway, this is the illustration that he did for Winter Equinox. So off you go.
So there's
lovely.
Those are the spoonbills in the poem. Winter Equinox. 1. Day drills down into night. Hills shed light. Sea bleeds red. 2. Bare branches thread raindrops, defiant strings of shining pearls. 3. Spoonbills sweep the mudflat smear, their beaks beat metronomic time. 4. Deep in the bed, I dream a lit labyrinth in the river's womb. 5. Buddha stirs, unwraps his knotted legs, lifts his hand to bless the bleeding earth.
Marvellous. Marvellous. And we will always remember your wonderful daughter, Siobhan, your wonderful daughter, Rose. And we included a couple of her poems in our anthology. And I'm going to read one of those for Rose. And Rose wrote a marvellous poem called Conversations with Juno, Who Brings Light. I'm helping you on with your lion print dress, micro queen. You stand, pearl barley feet planted, the goatskin fray of your impossible hair. You say, my one, and always no. This little circle is yours to fill. You take it up. How do you know to do that? You are as ecstatic as a dervish, a peacock, our family's smallest goddess. You can outplay your siblings, Neptune, Vesta. You cheat at memory. Your mother carries you on her back through the long grass. You feed chalk to my dog, then dress her in a t-shirt and socks. Oh, welcome. You breathe tousled wonderkind, hands to your heart, daughter of Saturn, singular niece.
Thank you, Caro. That poem is about my youngest granddaughter, and it certainly captures her. And the lovely illustration Roger's done you've just put up is of Rose's 2 children at a poetry reading, listening to their mother read. And he drew it from a photograph that I sent.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because very few poetry books actually have drawings or illustrations in them, it seems. When I was doing some research and publication and so on. And Roger did the first set of drawings. He didn't do them as drawings. He did them as pen and ink. And I told the poor man, I said to him, go away and do them again. I said, they're too heavy. They're too hard for this book. They need to be softer, and pencil is what you need for them. And he did them very kindly afterwards. He said, well, you were right. He took it on the chin, another set of work, but he's good, good like that. But Rose's poems were marvelous, and she was a force of nature, Siobhan, just like her mum, just like her mum.
She was. I will never be the poet she was, Caro, but I'm very proud of her work.
As you should be, as you should be. Let's go back now. Sarah's joined us. So Sarah is also from the Southern Hemisphere. I'm going to go backwards, actually. Let's go backwards to Sarah's slide. And Sarah, hello. Nice that you joined us. Hello. As you know, what we're doing is we're reading a poem, and we're also talking about poetry and a couple of questions. Which of your poems are you going to read tonight, Sarah?
I think I'll read Landscape with White Road.
Okay, lovely. Let's hear that. And then I'll ask you a couple of questions about your poetry practice.
Okay. Landscape with White Road. In April, we drove the old Mazda Superlight through the blue panels of Northland. It felt good to head north, if you know what I mean. Our kids slept in bunks in the room at the end. The sun slid up so early behind the hills. Caught the nectarines lanugo, turned them peachily, little sparks. I lay there as if on a raft. Magpie sounds as though I was back on my grandparents' farm, lovely and true, if unwanted. Magpie slid across the room, dark and determined. The sun reflected off us all morning, like light things do, waking up, painting itself in.
Lovely. Lovely. Sarah, your poems always have a kind of vibrancy and a life about them, which is of colour and the natural world. Would you say you've got any particular poets, or are there any poetic traditions? And they might have come from New Zealand particularly. Anything that shaped the way you've developed this unique voice? Is there anything that you would say you're conscious of?
Oh, thanks, Caro. Well, I think there's two sort of strands to this for me. One is I think I'm conscious that there's a few poets whose work I like a lot, like Louise Glick, who was an American poet. She passed away recently. And, she writes a lot about the natural world, but she does it in a way that I could only aspire to, really, which is just so intelligent and subtle. But she also writes sort of, a lot of her writing is infused with kind of, I think, a kind of spirituality. Well, that's what I pick up on. And I think it's quite hard to find, but I love her work. And probably other poets in a similar vein would be Robert Bly and Charles Wright. And back when I first really encountered poetry, it was American poetry, which I did a course at university in my 20s. So I encountered Robert Creeley and the Beat Poets, and I think I know, Caroline, you hate it when I do ampersands and and things like that, but that's all. I've just realised that's all from Robert Creeley, and I haven't dropped it because it must have made an impression on me at the time, and I still like the look of it on the page.
Yeah.
But the other strand is that I'm really busy digging into what I think could be fruitful traditions for me, and trying to unearth that in my work. So I'm studying a little bit of Hebrew, and I am looking at sort of, I guess, biblical or like spiritual traditions in poetry, and also probably, stuff about the natural world. So that's something that I'm still kind of finding, but it's really exciting to find it while I write.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It kind of leads into the other question I was going to ask you, which is about clarity and ambiguity in the work that you do. Poetry is brilliant for being able to be mysterious, and for people to be able to draw out what they want and need from it in a way. How do you feel about that kind of tension, or it's not conflict, but working together, clarity and ambiguity? How does that work for you when you're writing?
Yeah, I think there's a real balance to be had there. I love ambiguity and I love mystery, and I think that's why I love poetry, because it can hold those things. Um, but at the same time, some clarity is good. I mean, I love clarity of image. So I love Anne Carson's work and her really bright, clear images, and they can hold a clarity for me, a through line. But also I've learned things like I remember reading a poem by New Zealand poet Hera Lindsay Bird, and she starts it by saying, Monica, 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 Monica Geller of popular sitcom Friends. So that's just straight saying what it is. And I thought, oh, you can say that in a poem? So, you know, and I try to remember that. And if I'm writing about a painting, I'll just go ahead and say, you know, in Leonardo da Vinci's painting, blah, 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 because you can. And it means that it's one less thing to be unsure about. The reader knows where they are. So that's kind of a little trick. And then you can go, then I can go on and be as mysterious as I like.
Yeah. I think that's marvelous. I mean, and we've often, when you've read your poetry in our groups, Sarah, it's been a recurring theme, which is your real love of the natural world. It's maybe coming from your profession, working with, you know, with plants and flowers and so on. But it comes up time and time again, and there's something about the mystery of nature, which I think you often capture in your poetry, which is lovely. So thank you. Okay. We've got two of our wild birds have flown the nest at the minute. One of them, Mary, is actually at a poetry festival. And I think actually Janet might even have joined her. So for those of you who don't know, Mary and Janet, they are twin sisters, and they were both born, of course they were both born together in Edinburgh. And in the book, Mary's included a poem about it's about the storm of emotions. And Janet's included a wonderful poem, which I wouldn't even try to say, because she's done it in quite a lot of Scots dialect. But it's about a football scarf, and it's a very tender poem, and it's kind of what's left of people in an object, which I thought was really rather marvelous. Of course, I've kind of edited the collection, although it's only brief. I'm going to read one of my poems that's at the back of the book. And I will say that, you know, this came about really because, as Siobhan knows, we've put a dedication in the little book, which is to both Rose, Siobhan's daughter, and to my brother Andy. But it's my brother Andy who encouraged me to go back into poetry after many years fallow, when I was too busy working and distracted. And he told me, why aren't you doing what you used to do when you were in your 20s and 30s, Caroline? And when he died, he didn't actually know that I was doing any of this stuff by the time he died, which was only, a couple of years ago. And he certainly didn't know that I was doing an MLit at Glasgow, which is a great shame, because he would have loved that. There we go. This is about a walk I did shortly after he died, and it's called Snow on the Foreshore. All winter, I was waiting for redemption, for your voice to sing, to say a word, a prayer, amen. Kneeling on old bones. It starts. Falls softly, falls fast, covers causeway and foreshore, firs and pines, the smallest wood anemone. I pick up on twisted rack, a wentle trap. So far from home, alone. It spirals, its whisper. So we produced this little collection, which was a complete delight, and the wonderful Roger, yes, did his drawings. Good on you, Roger. And he's promised that if we decide we'll do another collection, that his services are available. So I'm hoping that might spur us on to a second volume. But Roger did a very fine job on that. even having to do the illustrations twice because his difficult wife, the editor, told him to. Good man. So this little recording, we're going to put it onto YouTube. If you like what you've heard, and if you'd like to buy a copy of Flight Patterns, you can contact me. I do send out individual copies. I'm suggesting a price of £10 for those, but £10 is more than the print cost, because any profits that we make on these, all those profits will be going to cancer research in memory of Rose and of my brother Andy. If all you want, if you've watched this video and you think I'd really like to read those and kind of dwell on them a little bit longer, then I can send you a PDF copy, which I'll charge you suggested price, £8. And again, the profits for that all go to cancer research. So if you would like a copy of Flight Patterns, that would be wonderful. And you'll be contributing to a good cause. We've been running for about an hour. That's probably long enough. Fellow poets, is there anything else anybody wants to add? Please put your mics on if you do. Okay, we hope that anybody who's watching this, whether you're friends, our friends, or our family, that you've enjoyed hearing from our voices, all very different poets. And just by way of signing off, can I say, without a doubt, poetry is a wonderful way to expand your life and expand your appreciation of love and of the great depths of loss and remembrance of wonderful things. And I do think that if you've never come across well-written poems before, my colleagues are really, really good at this. Buy a copy. Shall we say good night? I'm going to say good night and turn off the recording. But thank you so much. It's been a delight being with you.